Oh boy, this is not good news. Israel, white phosphorus used in Gaza. Israel's use of white phosphorus in military operations in Gaza and Lebanon puts civilians at risk of serious and long-term injuries, Human Rights Watch said today in releasing a question and answer document on white phosphorus. Human Rights Watch verified videos taken in Lebanon and Gaza on October 10th and 11th, 2023, respectively, showing multiple airbursts of artillery-fired white phosphorus over the Gaza City port and two rural locations along the Israel-Lebanon border, and interviewed two people who described an attack in Gaza. Well, this is pretty horrendous. You see, the only use that white phosphorus should be having that involves people is when you do the little magic trick with it to make your hands create smoke. Have you guys ever done that with a match before? Where you, like, burn the red phosphorus to make it into white phosphorus, and then you wipe it on your hands, and then you, like, rub your hands together, and then your hands start burning, because there's, like, it doesn't hurt or anything. It's, like, warm on your hands, but it creates a cool smoke reaction. Vsauce did it? Yeah, I think Vsauce has done it. I'm sure he has, yeah. That is the only use it should be having involving people. On the subject, here's Al Jazeera posting proof of Israel bombing ambulances as they followed the route Israel told them to on their way south to South Gaza. Yeah, they basically now said, so for those that don't know, the Gaza Strip isn't, like, just a literal prison. It's just a massive prison with a population of millions. And so when Israel says you've been cut off from a quarter of your land, you need to evacuate or we're going to bomb the shit out of you, that is pretty much like them saying when you're in a prison, move out of the way, we're gonna burn a quarter of the prison, of the cell block that you're in. And it's like, that's a pretty big deal. Yeah, it's a pretty much genocidal action that they're taking here. Here's the tweet. Warning distressing images. I imagine so. Lots of children on board, of course. Can't have a day in Israel without murdering some children.
They have targeted all the people who are transferring from the north to the south. They have targeted us now. They have targeted us now. I have injured in my leg, and this is one of the team of the Red Cross. They have injured. They have bombed us from the 16.
Indeed it is. Clearly marked medics, too. Clearly marked medical vehicles. War crime. War crime. War crime. Just as much as of a war crime as the Russian tanks rolling over cars with babies and children in them that we saw at the beginning of the war with Ukraine. Just as much, yep, just war crimes. Just straight up war crimes. Oh, it gets worse, by the way. It gets way, way worse. I've got a good excerpt here. In comments on Friday, Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, said Palestinians in Gaza were collectively responsible for the attack. Quote, "It's not true, this rhetoric about civilians being not aware, not involved. It's absolutely not true," he said. "They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime which took over in Gaza in a coup d'etat." The president has outright denied the existence of any innocent civilians in Gaza. The argument is that if they weren't in favor of it, they would have couped Hamas out of power. Reminding you guys, by the way, that nearly half of the population is under 15 years old. Yes. Nearly half of the population is under 15. And it is the most densely populated city on Earth. The last election was in 2006. How? They should have voted. Are people falling for this? Not really. I think everybody knows what's happening. You know, Justin Bieber, this is funny. Justin Bieber made an Instagram post with an image of just a bomb-to-shit Gaza, like an entire block of Gaza, the Gaza Strip blown up, and captioned it, "Pray for Israel." So that was Justin Bieber's reaction. White phosphorus can be used either for marking, signaling, and obscuring, or as a weapon to set fires that burn people and objects. Has a significant incendiary effect that can severely burn people and set structures, fields, and other civilian objects in the vicinity on fire. The use of white phosphorus in Gaza, one of the most densely populated areas in the world, magnifies the risk to civilians and violates the international humanitarian law prohibition on putting civilians at unnecessary risk. Quote, any time that white phosphorus is used in crowded civilian areas, it possesses a high risk of excruciating burns and lifelong suffering, said Lama Faki, Middle East and North Africa director at Human Rights Watch. Quote, white phosphorus is unlawfully indiscriminate when airburst in populated urban areas, where it can burn down houses and cause egregious harm to civilians. On October 11th, Human Rights Watch interviewed by phone 2 people from the Al Mina area in Gaza City who described observing strikes consistent with the use of white phosphorus. One was in the street at the time, while the other was in a nearby office building. Both described the ongoing airstrikes before seeing explosions in the sky, followed by what they described as white lines going earthward. They estimated the attack took place sometime between 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. Both said that the smell was stifling. The person who was in his office said that the smell was so strong that he went toward the window to see what was happening and then filmed the strike. Human Rights Watch reviewed the video and verified that it had been taken in Gaza City's port and identified that the munitions used in the strike were airburst 155mm white phosphorus artillery projectiles. Other videos posted to social media and verified by Human Rights Watch show the same location. Dense white smoke and a garlic smell are characteristics of white phosphorus. Human Rights Watch also reviewed 2 videos from October 10th from 2 locations near the Israel-Lebanon border. Each shows 155mm white phosphorus artillery projectiles being used, apparently as smoke screens, markings, or signaling. White phosphorus ignites when exposed to atmospheric oxygen, and that's why when you rub it on your fingers, you make smoke, because every little bit of it exposed to the air oxidizes and creates the heat reaction. So it's just it can be used for non-lethal means, but just using it in such a densely populated area means no matter what, you are committing a war crime by dropping it on people's fucking houses. Upon contact, white phosphorus can burn people thermally and chemically down to the bone, as it is highly soluble in fat and therefore in human flesh. White phosphorus fragments can exacerbate wounds even after treatment and can enter the bloodstream and cause multiple organ failures. Already dressed wounds can reignite when dressings are removed and the wounds are re-exposed to oxygen. Oh my god. Can you imagine that? Severe wounds, they take the fucking bandages off and they reignite a day later because there's a bit of white phosphorus still in there that got exposed to oxygen and it oxidated because of the blood and got exposed. Ugh. The use of white phosphorus in densely populated areas of Gaza violates the requirement under international humanitarian law to take all feasible precautions to avoid civilian injury and loss of life, Human Rights Watch said. Well, that's why the president put out a clear statement saying they don't believe any citizen of Gaza is innocent. They've declared every single Palestinian the enemy, which seems to give them, in their minds, legal right to exterminate them all. This concern is amplified given the technique evidenced in videos of airbursting white phosphorus projectiles. Airbursting of white phosphorus projectiles spreads 116 burning felt wedges impregnated within the substance over an area between 125 and 250 meters in diameter, depending on the altitude of the burst, thereby exposing more civilians and civilian structures to potential harm than a localized ground burst. So it's basically just showering people with it. Israeli authorities have not commented on whether or not they used white phosphorus during the ongoing fighting. Israel's use of white phosphorus comes amid hostilities following Hamas's deadly attacks on October 7th and subsequent rocket attacks that have killed, as of October 12th, more than 1,300 Israelis, including hundreds of civilians, and taking of scores of Israelis as hostages in violation of international humanitarian law. Literally, Hamas does not... By the way, remember, Hamas are not the good guys. Hamas is not fighting for Palestine. Hamas is not fighting for the human rights of Palestinians. Hamas are arguably just as evil as Israel and the IDF. They just have less power. If both are allowed to do what they want to do unabated, it will lead to untold tragedy and untold death. This is two horrific sides fighting, and all the citizens are paying the price. Now, here's where things get, I guess, somewhat complicated when it comes to discussions about this, because people like Hassan and, like, people who are, like, people on both sides who are apologists for the bad guys in either of these issues, will make excuses for the fact that the citizens overwhelmingly support the military on either side. Like, in Palestine, a lot of the civilians support Hamas because of course they would when the alternative is being bombed by Israel. While alternatively, when you've got bombs exploding over your head from Hamas every day, a lot of Israelis are very pro-IDF. So it's this very complicated issue where, yes, the civilians are in the crossfire, but the civilians are very much, like, have an opinion on the war. That's true, JDubs91, but let's not look past the fact that the attack Hamas did on the border was the largest killing of Jews since the Holocaust in a single span of 24 hours. It's a pretty awful tragedy of what occurred. Let's not, like, play it down by any means. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the tragedies the Palestinians have suffered, but, like, we don't need to have an equal trade here of suffering. That's not how we need to make things work, okay? Human Rights Watch has documented the Israeli military's use of white phosphorus in previous conflicts in Gaza, including in 2009. Israel should ban all use of airburst white phosphorus munitions in populated areas without exception. There are readily available and non-lethal alternatives to white phosphorus smoke shells, including some produced by Israeli companies, which the Israeli army has used in the past as an obscurant for its forces. These alternatives have the same effect and dramatically reduce the harm to civilians. In 2013, in response to a petition to Israel's High Court of Justice regarding the use of white phosphorus in Gaza, the Israeli military stated that it would no longer use white phosphorus in populated areas except in two narrow situations that it revealed only to the justices. In the court's ruling, Justice Edna Arbil said that the conditions would render use of white phosphorus an extreme exception in highly particular circumstances. Although this ruling did not represent an official change in policy, Justice Arbil called on the Israeli military to conduct a thorough and comprehensive examination and adopt a permanent military directive. That's not the rest of the article, but that's pretty much the gist of it, and the rest of it is basically summarizing what we've already seen and some of the protocols that are being broken here. So, Israel's committing war crimes. There's just no doubt about it. The question here is about whether or not Americans are going to be swayed to support Palestine or to support Israel. And the problem here is that we cannot conflate Hamas and Palestine. The media is desperately going to try to conflate Hamas and Palestine, that it's either Hamas wins or Israel wins. That is not the only reality that we exist in. I refuse to believe that. It cannot be.